And how did the Chinese stealth war start, which the book is about?
Yeah, it actually started here in New York. So, 2004, I'm going to live in China, but of course, the Air Force is calling me back, and so I go back to fly the B-2, move to the Pentagon, go back and fly the B-2 again. So now it's the third time at Whiteman, and I've done all the jobs there that there is to do. And the Air Force around that time decided, hey, you've learned Chinese, you've lived there. We think we're gonna, groom you to be the defense attaché. Of course, they didn't tell me that, but so the next assignment I got was here to New York City to be a military fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. And Steph and I were super excited because we'd always wanted to live in New York. So we lived up on Upper East Side, 82nd and 3rd. My son went to Loyola High School, and we really fell in love with the city. And but at the Council on Foreign Relations, I had a great opportunity to meet people in finance and business and industry, because we have those types of people that are members of the council. And I got my first real exposure to everything that I hadn't learned in business in the military. And while here, I was having lunch at a club here with a gentleman that had a hedge fund invested in China. It was $1 billion hedge fund, and lost a bunch of money in 2008, gained it all back by 2012. He basically sold all the money and given back to investors. And so we had a discussion and really an argument about the future of China. And I said, they've reached the end of their growth model. They're going to stagnate. They're going to have a hard time moving from low value added to high value added economy. And he said, you don't know what you're talking about. There's going to be a blip, and then they're going to take off, and they're going to be the most powerful economy and country in the world. And so, that relationship continued, and those relationships that I'd gained here in New York actually followed me to my next duty assignment, which was to be the advisor on China to the chairman of the Joint Strategic Chiefs. And so I get there, and we're looking at how do what's the future of our country in terms of national security. And I'm looking around and looking at kind of everything that we're doing. I'm focused on China, and I start really for the first time. My exposure before had only been with the people, the culture, the history, the geography, kind of just one side of the country. Now I was straight up, face to face with the Communist Party and the government, and realizing on the military side that we had a big problem. We had, loads of weapons on the Chinese side and not very many weapons on the U.S. side. And if you looked, as you projected that out, the red got more, the blue got less. And then if you looked at the relative GDPs, theirs was going up and ours was stagnating. And so, what we realized, and I had a team of China experts there, so all like me, they had lived in China, they spoke the language, they knew the Chinese, except for the difference that they had that I didn't have, is that they knew the government and they knew the party. And so I started reading, and so over the last 6 years, I've read thousands of pages of Communist Party documents and really understanding that side of China, the party and the government. And so we sat there and we looked at that problem and we said, this is going to be an interesting national security problem for the United States. What are the implications? And the farther you got into that, the more deeply you got into it, we realized that we were in a competition, quite frankly, that looked very much like the competition we had with the Soviet Union, except we were on the other side.
But how did it start, and when did it start, if you could put your finger on it?
Well, actually, it was about...
You said it started in New York.
It started in New York, but...
How?
So it started at that lunch, that relationship, that questioning of my understanding of the Chinese economy is where it started.
But when did China's stuff war on the U.S. start?
I got it. Okay. That's hard to say. I think you have to look at, when So, for instance, Michael Pillsbury wrote a book, the 100-Year Marathon. In there, he says that they have a 100-year plan to become the most powerful nation on earth, and in reality, they don't have a plan. What they have is a way of operating, and so I think what you can say is what I pinpoint probably this inflection point in our relationship with the Chinese Communist Party and the PRC is June 4th, 1989. That's really where I think we had an opportunity at that point. Their economy was less than $1 trillion, to really understand the regime for what it was. And instead, in August, we sent our national security advisor back, and we basically said, we're going to double down on this relationship. And what we did is we doubled down on a relationship that they had determined by that time. So there's three things they learned in the Tiananmen massacre. Number one, the United States, in league with others in China, were trying to overthrow the Chinese Communist Party. Number two, we could not be connected to globalization and the internet without pushing our ideology and protecting the understanding of the centrality of the Chinese Communist Party to the people, and that if we ever had a separation of the Communist Party from the people, that the Communist Party would fail. And so that's where they began to really re-engineer their society so that they could have access to the science, the technology, the talent, the innovation, and the capital of the open system without necessarily getting any of the human rights, civil liberty, rule of law, or democratic principles.